There we go.
And all right, let's start. Thank you everybody for coming this early in the morning. Today we have Namiko Tsuruta, and it's an honor for me to be introducing her today because me and her go kind of way back to 2016, I think. She was one of the first people to observe my horrible lessons back when I started teaching as an ALT. And today she will be talking about classroom engagement, which is a very important topic. And she also gave me lots of very interesting insights back in the days. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about it today. So Namiko, you have the stage. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so good to see some familiar faces, and special thanks to Nagano Gelt for this wonderful opportunity to really reflect on my teaching and also my teacher training career. I just want to make sure that I am presenting. Okay. So very quickly, this is kind of the usual thing that I show in the beginning, but you probably would be better off with something to write with, so pen and paper. I think that a lot of these activities that we're going to do today may be easier on your PC, so fingers crossed, hopefully you're on your PC. We will be using the breakout rooms, and then any questions or comments that you have, Miguel, if you can kind of let me know. I don't mind being interrupted.
Sure thing.
Thank you. Okay. So welcome. Okay, so this is the title of my presentation. I put management in parentheses because just with my preference of teaching, I tend to place more emphasis on engagement, and I will kind of take you through that process as well. Okay, so I'm not sure about other people's teaching experience, but since I was little, I did want to become a teacher. I just didn't know what I wanted to teach. So I used to play school a lot with my sisters and also with my friends. And this is my history of actual teaching, not just pretending to teach. And as you can see, I have taught all age groups. And so it's been very eye-opening to return to my country and have this experience of working with different level learners. But, you know, since this is also a workshop, I'd like to kind of know which learners you work with. So if you can use Zoom's annotate function, and please stamp your learner groups. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Carmela. Yeah, I'm sure that some of you actually teach more than one group of learners. I'm interested to, oh, wow. Jackie, who are the other learners?
Teachers, as in JTEs?
Oh, yes,
training.
yes, okay.
Yep.
Great. No one teaches the elderly? Okay. Oh, Mallory, you do. Great.
Yeah, how do we annotate? We're getting a few people who don't.
Oh, okay, so if you go to the very top, if this is on your PC though, if you go to the very top, you should see, or I think you might need to click on something, and then you should see this black bar, and then there's a pencil mark that says annotate.
You go to view options at the top of your screen, and from the pull down menu, there's an annotate function.
John, did you figure it out? Robert as well? Okay, yeah. Anything is okay as long as I can see where people are at. Oh wow, okay, so we do have some like toddlers too. Great. Okay, so mostly like university down to Hoikuen and kindergarten. Okay, great. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, so who teaches the senior citizens? I think Mallory, you're one. Who's the other one?
That would be me. I have I don't know. It's I don't know if we say senior citizens, but it's a private student. Definitely, I'd say in her 60s.
Oh, okay, great.
So yeah.
Okay. And then I see a lot of others. Are the others all teachers? Or who are the others? Those of you who annotated that one. Okay, so it sounds like teachers. All right, then let's move on. Okay, oh, I always forget to do this. Yeah, please make sure that you clear your. Sorry. Okay, let me erase. Okay, so this is kind of the format of today's workshop. First, I'd like to kind of, what's this? I'd like to focus on us, which is the teachers. And then for part two, we'll definitely then focus on engagement, which is with our learners. Okay, so this might seem abstract, but take a guess of what this may be. Any guesses? Okay, let me give you a hint. No? That's a big hint. Any guesses?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the E stands for English.
Yeah, very good. What do you think the other one stands for? Yeah, I like the crying olive.
I'm suspecting today is Japanese.
Yeah, good.
And is that
If it's
male and
foreign?
female?
Not male, not female, but good guesses.
Math.
No. Mandarin. Yeah, nice guess. No, not Mandarin. Oh, mixed languages.
Mother tongue?
That's a good guess. Mother tongue. Actually, I don't know if I have a mother tongue now. Okay, you give up? So this is my language history. The reason why I also include music is because Japanese was my first language, but music since the age of 5, I've been studying it. And since music is an international language, I do consider that a language as well. French was from, I think the first class I took was in 6th grade, and then I continued from high school on. Okay. What's the surprise, Mark, Valerie? What are you surprised about?
About the French?
Ah
What?
oui, je parle
Yeah.
français un peu.
Ok, un peu.
Un peu.
Great.
So I want to know about your Japanese history now. I hope you know how to annotate now. Can you do that? Oh, sorry, I still see the old ones. But yeah, thank you for using the different marks. Okay. Wow, some of you have lived here for more than 7 years. Okay. The person who checked, I have a partner, family, or friends who I interact with regularly. Can you be more specific if you don't mind? And what about I use Japanese at work or have hobbies that require knowledge of it. What hobby is it, or what kind of work do you have to use Japanese for?
Should we add that on the forum
Oh no,
or
you
as?
can just tell me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm married and I have a son, so
Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah, very good.
my wife is Japanese, so
Yeah, in your family, it must be interesting because you also speak like multiple European languages too, right?
I'm trying to teach Italian also to my son. So
Oh, that's amazing.
3 languages at once. That's going to be
No,
interesting to
no,
see.
that's the way to do it. No, definitely. Yeah, hit them all at once. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so thank you very much for sharing your language history. Please don't be too concerned about knowing or not knowing Japanese or English. It's quite open today, and I'm going to try and make sure that if there's anything that you don't understand, please just put it in the chat, and then Miguel can tell me. Oh, wow, American Sign Language? That's very cool. Yeah, that's a language for sure. Okay. Oh, sorry. Now I have to really clear this. Hold on one sec. Okay. There we go. All right. Now, for those of you who can't read it, it's okay. Don't worry about it. But for those who can, this is my biography. Okay. Now, those of you who could read it, can you help those who can't? Shall we go back very quickly? Can any of you volunteer?
Born in Fukuoka and grew up in Nara, and
Yes.
went from Japan to America, Connecticut, state of Connecticut. Moved to the state of Connecticut in Japan. I'm going backwards.
Yeah, Mary, you're really good.
From first year of elementary to college, you lived in America, and from first year of high school, you went to a private high school, living in a dorm, like a boarding school, kind of. And then you went to the musical conservatory in Michigan and studied piano performance. And then you you majored in psychology in Michigan University, and I think, am I right?
Yes, that's right, that's right.
And then you quit working as a nursery school teacher? Or?
Yes, very good. Yeah. Hoikusha is like a daycare,
okay.
instructor, but it's like a preschool teacher, yeah.
And you came back to Japan in 1998, and your native language, mother tongues are English and Japanese, and you can speak French.
Yes, yeah. And near native in Japanese, but not literate. Mary, how many years have you been living in Japan?
Almost 50. In 2 years, it'll be 50.
And then, Mary, how long or how many years did it take you to be able to read this level of Japanese?
I can't remember. My memory is shot.
No, but thank you very much.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I went really fast. Sorry about that, Ellen. Okay. So these are things to think about, because obviously your background is very important in terms of not just understanding how language is learned or how anything is learned, but also your understanding of Japanese also affects how you use it or don't use it in the classroom. These are some other questions to think about above the surface of the iceberg. I think most of you probably know what we're talking about here in terms of identity and all the underlying issues then that also come with it. Okay, so now, if you can, because I'd like to, also combine some tech tools as well, since we are in that age now. If you can go to www.menti.com and then enter this code, I have a question for you. I see patience as a very big word, but really good words. Empathy. Yeah, this really shows your experience in teaching as well. Yeah, this is wonderful. Thank you. Authenticity. Oh, that's nice. Works well with other JTEs. Yeah, because some of you are team teaching too. Not just knowledge. Yeah, I agree. Humor. Yeah, self-development, professional development, definitely. Yeah. Sorry, some of the words are getting you a little bit smaller. Experience, compassion. Great. Have you all had a chance to submit at least 1 or 2 answers? It looks like it's still going. Okay, so then if I can, Miguel, sorry, can we go back to the slides? Is that all right?
Yep, sure, we're back.
Okay, so you actually included a lot of the traits, knowledge, and skills that my favorite school teachers had. And I wanted to give you an example of certain teachers that really influenced me along the way. And obviously the first one was my kindergarten teacher in Japan. And so obviously that would have the greatest impact. And that was the reason why I actually wanted to become a kindergarten teacher initially. The second teacher was a teacher actually who used to be a lawyer and a very successful one, but he decided that he wanted to do something more rewarding. And so he decided to become an English teacher. And I believe now he actually has a higher position in the school administration, but he was someone who I really respected. His wife was my college counselor, and I am forever grateful to him for allowing me and giving me the voice to speak up and speak my mind. So he was someone who really helped me develop my confidence. Peterson, I don't know if you know about positive psychology, but he's one of he's not the one who created it, but he did work with Seligman. And he was my professor for Psychology 101 and Abnormal Psychology, the funniest guy that you will ever meet. And he was one of the best lecturers at U of M. And then for my professional development, I took 9 courses. And I studied with 2 really great professors, and one of them was Professor Aloeo, and he was the one who really helped me develop the skills to engage my learners through group work. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So what is class management? Now this is where I'd like you to work in your breakout rooms, but first, before you do, I'd like you to think of your own definition. What do you think class management is in 1 sentence? So keep it simple. So think of your own definition in one sentence, okay? And then we'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes to come up with your own. And then I'm going to ask you to go into your breakout rooms where you're going to work together and then take all those definitions and put them into one per group. And finally, okay, so is everybody back now?
Mhm.
Okay, and then I hopefully you've designated someone to give your definition or your group definition of classroom management. Can I just ask whoever is ready to do their presentation?
I can go first. I wrote it down.
Thank you, Robert.
Oh, I go by Tobin.
Oh, Tobin. Okay, thank you, Tobin.
So we had a group of 2, so it didn't take us very long to set it up, but
That's good.
but we went with classroom management is establishing goals and expectations for guiding students.
Clear and simple. That's great. Thank you. You were with Brandon, right? Yeah. Thanks, guys. Okay. Anyone else?
So we didn't really have time to combine all our parts into one comprehensive whole. So we just linked them all together, but it kind of makes sense as a long statement. So it goes like this. Class management is creating a safe zone of personal development for learners, keeping students engaged, active, and on task both in and out of the classroom, and mastering specific procedures that give them the knowledge and skills to carry out the tasks that help the teacher manage the class. So a long sentence.
But you also cover a lot. And I think that definition probably goes even like beyond management. So thank you. Did you write that down? Because I wouldn't be able to remember that. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Yes, hold on one second. I did write that down. That is that, and I'll actually post it.
Oh, thank you, Train. Thank you. That's great. Thanks for sharing. Okay, who's next?
I'll go next.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
All right, so I think we were room 4 or something. There was 4 of us in the room, and we decided all the themes are kind of the same. So we decided on the definition of the techniques to provide a safe and effective learning environment.
Wonderful.
And the whole general thing was that the classroom has to be a safe area for the students to feel confident to produce English. And also the important thing was for them to use the English in the class or use whatever they were learning about in the class. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Our group were discussing what is effective classroom management, and one of the members made a very adroit point that it's a balance between power and time, how much power you can delegate to so that students can effectively learn and not feel like they're being tyrannized. But at the same time, you have to be aware of how many seconds are left or how many minutes are left in the class, because that's a huge part of it too.
Yeah, time management is really important, but I like that you used the word balance. When I heard the word power, I thought, oh, but then you used balance. And I think that's really important. So distribution of power, yeah. Okay. Anyone else?
In my group, I think we tried, well, there were so many variables. And so we tried already, we probably already went to step 2. So I'm gonna save my answer for later. Otherwise, it's like, how can we put this into one sentence?
Yeah, it's
naturally.
Right? Yeah, I mean, some of you already went like beyond the definition of classroom management, so that makes me happy as well.
So I'm gonna save my answer for later.
I'll hold you to it. Is there anyone else? Are we done? Okay, then They might be kind of boring, but I want to show you. Oh, actually, before I show you though, based on what you heard others say, look at your original definition, not the one that you created as a group, but look at your original definition. And I'd like you to modify that or add things to it. And then whatever you add, if you can just jot in the chat what things you also added to your original definition. Oops, my bad. Or did you not want to make any modifications because you were super pleased with your group definition?
I think it's because Mr. DeVore pasted his response into the chat.
And that kind of demotivated you to?
I wouldn't say demotivated,
Yeah.
but I would say that it inspired me to
Okay,
look
good,
at
good,
all
good.
the
I'm
other
glad. Okay.
perspectives mentioned. But his is right there, and it's really easy to look at it and say, yeah, it ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, yeah, he did cover a lot. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was because of the great ideas of my other group members.
Oh, see, that's teamwork.
Excellent job delegating credit.
Yes, and Susan, this is good too. She said, I added safety. That's very important group work too. Take credit for your own suggestions as well. See, now people are adding. Okay, good. Yeah. Great, okay, thank you. Okay, so now, do you want to kind of look at a textbook definition of what classroom management is? And then if you have any insights, please let me know. What do you think about this definition? Yeah, Susan, that was my feeling as well. Yeah, and Trent shares that too. What are some of the words that kind of resonated with you when you thought about that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's probably the first part, right? Like organized, orderly, focused, attention, yeah, attentive, tasks, yeah. But obviously they do maximize the behaviors that facilitate or enhance learning as well, because they minimize those things that may not be beneficial to learning. Okay. So how about anything or anyone missing from this definition? You know, recently everyone's been talking about neurodiversity, right? What about those kinds of students? Do you think that they are included in this definition? Yes. Yeah. 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 And also thinking about the pandemic, I think it was Train that also wrote about happiness and well-being also being included, right? Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, this definition is very typical of a quote generic classroom, right? And that's not the learners that we're dealing with, especially now. Yeah, and I think I agree with Ellen too, that a lot of the focus seems to be kind of like on the teachers, right? Like it almost sounds teacher directed. Okay, and that is kind of the direction that we're moving towards. Not teacher directedness, but the other way. Okay, so now think about the activity that I just asked you to do, and I'd like you to kind of think about your SLA background, or those who haven't studied second language acquisition. These are the things that I'd like to, I wanted my learners, and so today you're my learners, to think about. So first, did I give you the definition of classroom management? Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to do it, but based on your knowledge, your experience, it makes more sense for you to define it. And then the 4 C's of the 21st century skills, we talk about this all the time now, right? Those things were also practiced through your activity. Presenting, I mean, obviously you have to select the people that are presenting, and then hopefully you'll vary that in your classrooms as well. But the feedback is also necessary because not everyone has the answers. And then thinking about the definition, thinking about other people's responses, then you think about your own thoughts, right? Because what other people think may not necessarily be your teaching experience and your environment, your teaching environment. So those are the things to take into account as well. So is this classroom management? I beg to differ, and I would like to say that this is more about engagement than management. Okay, so now you can just put it in the chat if you'd like. What are your thoughts about this? If you want to annotate it, you can annotate it too. So do you see any truths in these statements? Cody says no. Okay. I like the exclamation point. Yeah. Yeah, Ellen, I'm going to say this in Japanese, but my complaint is that teachers often say, Japanese students are so shy. And I want to say, no, they're not. You just don't know how to get them to speak up. I agree. Yes. Yeah, they're thinking. Yeah, maybe they just lack the practice or the confidence. Yeah. If it's okay for me to ask, so number one, someone said, oh no, that's false. How can you defend your position? What would you say? Oh, Chiaki-san says all false. I give false for all answers. No true statements. I have never seen so many F's in my life. This is great. Thank you. Okay. Right? Yeah, these are all myths, but you'll be surprised how many people say these things. And believe me, because I have been in the field of teacher training for a long time, I hear this all the time. Noise. Well, there is such a thing as good noise, right? I mean, if you're like working as a group, I mean, yeah, it's going to be noisy, right? I always think with the raising of the hands, I often think in the real world, when do we ever raise our hands? And the only thing that I could come up with was like, you know, in the newsroom when you raise your hand, but you don't even get called on either. That's how it feels like sometimes in the classroom. And then the learners are quiet. You know, I've attended like so many online sessions these past 2 years. And I think, you know, I see people who participate in these sessions and they're quiet. So what does that mean? Because they don't have the answers? I doubt that, because we're all teachers, right? So those kinds of things we need to be careful of sometimes when we think that way. But since you guys don't, I'm very pleased to see that. Yeah. And yet, it's true. Usually the ones who misbehave the most are the funniest, the most creative. They just, you know, need to be more stimulated. Sometimes the most intelligent in the class. Deadlines. Have you ever talked to a professor who teaches SLA? They are the most understanding teachers in the world because they know that we have invested a lot of money in our education. So they will give you extensions like crazy. So the real world does allow you extensions, but you know, obviously for different reasons. Okay, thank you very much for sharing your answers in the chat. I appreciate it. Yes, if you're lecturing, yeah, other noise is disruptive. Yeah. Actually, Robert, when I was a university student, I was in a lecture hall with, I think, about 400 students. And there was a student who was reading a newspaper and the lecturer was so upset. And he said something like, you know, eating in my lecture hall is one thing, but he's like, the fact that you're reading a newspaper is just downright rude, and kicked him out of the lecture hall. But yeah, I think we need to be aware. And then I think Susan, you commented, yeah, quiet contemplation. Yeah, that's right. Reflection is so important, especially when it comes to like language learning. Yeah, consistency, so important. And in parenting too, right, Nicholas? Okay. Okay, oh, sorry, I did it again. Okay. So now let's move over to part 2 then, understanding our learners. So what motivates them? What interests them? Right? What do they want from their studies, and what do they want out of their lives, right? And then, you know, I think some of you have already commented on this. They've been deprived of a lot of things, right? Since the pandemic, I've talked to a lot of teachers, and also teachers have also been deprived and have been really stressed out because of all the digital changes. So what adjustments do they have to make? Yeah, Paul, yeah. I share your sentiments. Hopefully, but I doubt that that happens in your class, because from what I hear, you do a lot of group work. Okay, so the one thing just to consider, and this is because now we're talking about language and engagement, we do have to think about how we do talk to people, right? So how we ourselves have experienced language in our life experience, how we have talked to our family members, how we were taught in school, our work history, and also the successful and not so successful interpersonal relationships that we have had, right? So understanding that there is breakdown in communication, just even in our first language, is also very important to understand. So you can imagine then what happens in our second language. Yes, yeah, John. So as teachers, yeah, we need to make the adjustments. It's not the students, but we need to make the adjustments. But eventually, hopefully, help our learners make those adjustments themselves too. Okay, so my point is, and this is referring back to the title, management and engagement are two different things. Management really has to do with your ability to plan your lessons, your time management. A lot of execution is going on in terms of management, right? Inside the classroom, outside the classroom. But engagement is in the classroom. Sometimes outside of the classroom if you're giving feedback, but usually inside the classroom. Yes. yeah, asking questions about what they're interested in. Yeah, I can't either. I can't imagine. That's why I was in the chat room so early this morning, because I can't imagine interacting with people I know nothing about. Okay. So once again, things to ponder. What kind of learning environments do we want then for our learners? And then if you are encountering any problems, what's preventing you from achieving what you'd like to, either online or in your classrooms? What have you tried to adjust to your current environment? And what advice would you give others to help them with issues that they may be having? Okay, so for this, I'd like you to return to your breakout rooms. I think it's okay to return them to the same breakout rooms, Miguel, if it's not. Okay, so we're all back. Can I hear from some of the speakers that have been designated to represent their groups?
We didn't really designate anyone, but
oh, okay.
I was making
Are you
notes.
volunteering?
So
oh,
I'm
okay,
volunteering.
thank you.
We didn't really have a whole lot of time to get into it. We had some circumstances, but anyways, I think we kind of agreed that the environment we were looking for was kind of a happy, fun, cheerful environment, right? Open to the students. And one condition we talked about was, well, COVID-19. I mean, COVID-19, I think, just in general, is creating a little bit of depression, in the home life, and that spills into the school life. So I can kind of feel that personally. But also because of COVID-19, they have masks and we can't see facial expression because of those masks. And that goes both ways from us as well.
Yes.
So they can't see what we are feeling. We can't see what they're feeling, and they can't see what the teachers are feeling. And that cuts off a lot of communication, a lot of nonverbal communication. That's very important, right? Especially in my context, I teach at elementary school, where those facial expressions are even more valuable as nonverbal. So I think that's pretty much what we talked. We also talked about tablets and how we were using that in the classroom and how that helped with management. We didn't really get into it too much, but we can kind of do different things despite COVID-19. We can do different things, different activities that we couldn't do before. And it doesn't involve them touching or getting too close to each other. So that's all.
Yeah, Trent, thank you so much for hitting on so many important points, especially due to the pandemic. Yeah, I mean, we all often talk about, proximity and space being a very important part of the learning experience, especially for younger learners. But yeah, we've had to make more than several adjustments. And yeah, it's been, I think, stressful. Just as stressful, if not more, for teachers to get students ready for that too. Thank you. I'm sure that some of the sentiments are the same. Did anybody have anything different? Ellen, yes.
Yeah. I don't know if I can get my hand down again. Okay. Hold on. We talked about large classes and large mixed ability classes, and how students don't want to speak out in front of other students. And so Susan was talking about using games and just how profound the learning is. So just maybe we want to get students to understand that they really can learn by playing games, because there's a whole variety of stuff you can do as a group or a whole class. Susan Jones was talking about hybrid classes and the difficulty of dividing your attention to the room, and maybe getting around that by asking the students in the classroom to join the Zoom with the students who are outside the classroom. And actually something which I've tried was to say, go to a different room to my students who are in the room, and they have more fun. by going to a different room. And so actually letting go of a bit of the control that way. And just going back to the problem of communicating with the mask, I think talking about it explicitly and saying to students, look, it's a pantomime, see if you can communicate with only your eyes and actually do a test. Can you communicate? Yes, I do, by your eyes only, with no speaking. And can you communicate? That's strange, with your eyes only. So I've sometimes done a little activity, which is just do it face only or gesture only, especially if it's online, face and gesture. So if we kind of say to them, yeah, it's a problem, and how are we going to get around it? That can be quite fun, but obviously it's also much harder work as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Yeah, I think that we're used to certain things going a certain way. And I think one thing that this pandemic has taught us is that we do have the ability to come up with alternative solutions that are probably just as important as the skills that we were teaching before. Being able to read nonverbal gestures, that is so important, especially for teachers who are working with toddlers. Because if you can't, especially the toddlers, if they can't see their teachers' faces, that's also a problem as well. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, Susan, the point about games, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if we think about the lives of kids and even the lives of adults, I mean, if we think of the games that we play and what we learn from that as well, yeah, it's interesting that we don't allow it in schools, and yet that's the learning that they get most out of. Anything else from others?
Can I?
Yes, please.
Yes. Actually, our room, the first topic was focus. And I asked some hint or advice at the chat room. And for me, some students always disturb other students or disturb my class. And I ask my chat group member, what kind of thing I can do to reduce such kind of disturbing thing. And the older group advised me, like, I can, how can I say, use that kind of disturbing things to engage class. For example, if some students draw something and, hey, look at this, I draw this, then I can approach that kind of student and, oh, please look at everyone, or please show me and explain about this picture in English, what color, what this is about. Or if some students just keep chatting, then I can also approach them. If you don't like my lesson, what kind of thing do you want to learn? And I can try to, how can I say, use their chatting topic into today's key sentence or phrases. So then I can change my mind. Okay, disturbing thing, I can also use that kind of thing into lesson.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
no, I think it's great.
Well.
Yeah, no, that was wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think that any student voice in the classroom needs to be recognized. I think we tend to reprimand and we tend to negate a lot of the behaviors that actually we could be not negatively like reinforcing, but actually helping them develop better skills in communication. And I think that's one way to do that. I think the teacher needs to be aware of what behaviors to nip in the bud, and then what behaviors that I think can promote more learning to happen, especially among young kids, because developmentally, I mean, that's the whole point of going to school, is to learn those things, and then learn those life skills that are going to be then important in their future. So yeah, thank you very much. That's great. I'm really happy to hear the variety of things that you've been talking about in your designated groups as well. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Namiko, I'll just
Hi.
my
Yeah,
two
go ahead.
cents. I think one of the biggest difficulties for me, like I started in eikaiwa, like really small classes, and then moved to the public education system after that with like 30 plus kids at times. So speaking of, you know, getting our students communicating, that was a really big challenge for me. It's like, how do you involve so many students when you've only got, what, 45 minutes? And, you know, the easy answer, I guess, is pair work and group work. But we talked a little bit about, you know, we often say that we want our students to communicate all the time. And yet we have like an activity or two activities that might have some pair work or group work, but then we fall back into that lecture style, look at me kind of thing. And I think it's a really easy trap to slip back into and sort of, we had some we had some technical difficulties, so we didn't really get into like how to solve that in our discussion. But you know, when we think of the environment, you've got desks often as islands facing towards the teacher. And you know, if we can somehow change the physical environment, like moving desks and grouping them and things like that, I think we go a long way to not just saying what we want, but actually walking the walk as well.
Yeah, and Brandon, I'm so glad that you brought up this idea of how to design your classroom. Obviously online it's a little bit more complex, but in the physical classroom, how to set the desks. I've experimented in many different ways, and I guess based on my experience, I think the best way is to try all the different ways, because there are advantages to one way versus another. I remember one time I was teaching at the school for about 11 years, and you know, just like you, I came from a very small classroom setting to a really large one. And I put all the desks, or all the tables, because they had tables, against the walls. So none of them were facing me. And then they were facing the walls because they had their iPads. And they were sitting with, I think, 2 or 3 other members per table. And what that allowed them to do was to really focus on their individual projects. But when they needed help, they didn't go to me. They went to their friends who sat next to them. And I really saw the beauty of learning taking place that way. When it comes to projects, I think the island is a very good example. But I think most of us who have studied cooperative learning strategies, we usually say the ideal number is 2 to 4. I think online, though, I've heard a lot of people say 3 is best. And then also it depends on the learners, like if they're, especially at the university level, it depends if, you know, the student is a boy or if the student is a girl. So those kinds of factors come into play as well. But how do we know these things? How do we know that things work and don't work? Well, first, I think it's trial and error. And the other is attending sessions like this and having those real discussions about what's been working in your classes, what observations that you have met, and also doing a little bit of classroom research yourself, not based on other people's research, but doing it yourself to see if that suits your particular teaching style as well. So I think usually we get feedback based on someone else's preference for teaching, but we really have to think about how we do it and you know, what suits us. And we also have to be flexible enough to adjust our ways too. That's one of the things about being a teacher trainer. You got to be able to do everything. And you have to be able to not just say it, but you have to be able to prove it. And I think that's really hard. And so many times, you know, I may have overworked myself, but I've always insisted that I stay in the classroom because there's no other place to do your real research than with the actual subjects that you're quote studying, which are your students. So yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then can we move on? Okay, so now we're getting to theory because this is JALT, and I always feel this pressure to kind of talk about things that are important and also hopefully to teach you some new concepts too as well. For those you know, with your PhDs, I don't know, some of this will be review, but when I was thinking about engagement and what teachers can do, the only thing I could think about was well, what sparks joy in your learners? I think someone mentioned this already in the group, right? Happiness, well-being, those are the things that are really important right now. So then what are the things to think about? Well, I think most of us know the idea of motivation being a very important, but also being a very complex subject, as many motivational theorists would say, and especially the most famous one, Professor Dornier, he would say that, well, motivation, it depends, right? Initially, it might be something, but then it changes. And then he even addresses direct motivational current, which is also performance-based. And then how to maintain that, and then how to really reflect on what kind of learner you want to be. We all know Paul Nation's 4 strands, right? The balance between meaningful input, output, vocabulary learning, and also the one thing that I often think is missing from a lot of classrooms is the fluency aspect. Where is the extensive reading happening? Where is the fluency practice happening, and the meaningful listening, the interesting choices that you choose for your learners? That's missing. Group learning, we talk often about task-based learning. That's something that you encounter today with your class management group work. CLIL is something that's very popular these days, thinking about our learners and their language abilities, mixing content with language integrated learning. PBL is a little bit higher level for learners, but project-based learning can also be very simplified into step-by-step activities, which I have also done at the elementary school level. Something very basic as doing a group project about something that students are interested. I remember saying—
Sorry, Namiko.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, there you go. You cut out there. We weren't hearing you for a few minutes.
Oh, really? Sorry.
For
Where did I stop?
I actually could hear.
Oh, really?
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it was. It might have been a person-specific issue, connection specific.
So a lot of the TBL, CLIL, PBL is a lot of group-based stuff. CLIL, you can also choose to do it, in a large classroom setting, teacher-directed. But PBL, TBL, those are very much group-oriented ways and preferences for teaching. We often talk about Bloom's taxonomy, the new one. Everyone talks about lowering the affective filter, making sure that your warm-up activity really is a warm-up activity, that really is a review activity to engage your learners, to get them prepared for the newer activities. Transitions, we don't really often talk about transitions, but transitions are also very important parts of your lesson as well. How do you transition from one activity to the next? And also routines. Routines are very important depending on the age of your learners. But the variety of activities, do you have things that are, kinesthetic? Do you have things that appeal to the physical learners, or those that appeal more to the visual? And also the different ways that we can be learning. So are you just using your textbook, or are you supplying your own materials with authentic materials that have more relevancy to do with like the current world that we live in, rather than, let's say, quote, stereotyped characters in a textbook that really don't address a lot of the problems and social issues that are happening these days. Things to think about during your lesson. Well, the things that we just had discussed, the meaningful interactions. What kind of feedback are you giving? And what kind of negative feedback are you giving? Is it constructive, or is it demotivating? Is it going to support your learners? Brandon mentioned teacher talk versus group work. I find in many classes that instructions are not necessary, especially at the higher levels. If you want to really help your learners understand something, write the instructions, give it to the group, and have them figure it out. Sometimes you don't even need to give instructions. I think I was telling Paul this yesterday, but I had a group of IT learners in group classes, and I never gave them instructions because I thought they should be asking me what to do. I gave them the topic and then they kind of looked at me and they said, what are we supposed to do? And I said, well, what do you think you're supposed to do? And then they were kind of having to figure it out that way because they're adults, right? They don't need my instructions. And also they're IT guys, so they need to figure these things out. With younger learners, I tend to take them more step by step, but I also want to give them agency and give them that space for autonomy to discover things. There are so many things that they can discover on their own without me having to tell them and nag them. I tend to kind of not rotate around the groups so much, but kind of do that at the end when things are kind of more solidified in terms of ideas. This is something that's important, but after the lesson, meaning after an activity that the students did, reflection time for students is very important. Any new activity that we do, we always reflect and ask the students what they thought they were doing well, what they thought that they needed more work with. Sharing, revising your lesson plan just doesn't happen outside of the classroom. It happens with your students and your learners. And I think that's very important. I think students need to be more involved in that process as well. Okay, so since we are teaching language, I often like to combine behavioral issues or rule reinforcement with language. So often I think about how learners are going to manage their behavior in the real world. How am I going to help them prevent some of these problems that may occur if they behave a certain way? Classroom rules, are they just for the classroom, or are you making rules that are actually relevant to their real life? So for example, being late to class, are you reprimanding them for being late to class because you want to start on time, or are you actually teaching them the real life lessons of being late? Even not leaving class on time. I used to have a lot of kids who would just overstay their welcome, but I wanted to make sure that they weren't late for their next class, because that's also important. Not because I get in trouble, but because they get into trouble. And I think time management is a very important thing that we all kind of need to work on, especially myself. Sleeping in class, I often hear teachers saying that they allow their students to sleep in class, but that too, it's interesting living in this country, because actually I was watching the news and I saw members of the Diet, and they were falling asleep in their meetings, and teachers too. You see staff members, right, sleeping. And I think, well, is this culture, or is this something that can be prevented? And I think the reason why they sleep is because they're not involved. They don't think that it's a one-way street for them. They receive the information, they don't have to say anything back. And I think that kind of organizational structure is what is making them fall asleep. Talking over their peers, sometimes we do interrupt, but how does that look, and how does that create conflict in learners when they're speaking with other people from different countries? Those kinds of things I think need to be addressed. Not submitting an assignment, that is actually problematic, especially like if you have to do a presentation and then you don't have a presentation that's ready for submission. So in that case, it's a very serious consequence. But not handing in one homework assignment, is that really going to be detrimental to the student? Well, yes, maybe, maybe not. That kind of communication needs to happen in the classroom, not because they have to, but because you want them to learn something from that. Okay, so these are the questions that we've kind of gone through already. One thing I really want to emphasize is the power of storytelling. This is becoming very popular in a lot of sessions. And one thing that I've always made a point in my classes to do is to really talk about my identity and what that means in terms of my language history, how I can help them learn. I don't really hold back in terms of storytelling. I do tell my students stories about bullying, not being a victim of it, but I've seen stuff happening in the classrooms, how students feel about it. Something very simple like haircuts. They're pencil cases. It can be anything, but something to kind of make a connection between the students. There was a point in my time when I had lost a lot of weight, and that process, my students saw me going through that, and I actually explained to them what I was doing every day to regulate that. And I think they did really appreciate that the teacher was also working on herself and not just telling the students to do something and work on something. And I often did a lot of sharing of stories and successes in the classroom, not just with my peers, but also with other students. So, you know, this is the way that this class did it. And I don't know if it's going to work in your class, but maybe this is something that you might try, ideas that another student came up with. Maybe this is something that you can do in your group, those kinds of things, so that they understand that it's not just me focusing on them, but just learning in general. Okay, so now I'd like to kind of give you time to do this. So if you can go to this Padlet link, I'd like you to look
sorry,
at the,
Namiko,
yeah, go ahead.
before we just transition to the next thing, it's almost time for our scheduled time to finish.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'll let you continue, but I just wanted to say that we are scheduled until 11.
Okay.
If you need to leave, that's fine, but I'll very happy to have you continue.
Okay. Yeah, I have so much stuff, but I think I'd like to leave at this point because we've talked a lot about support for one another. So if you can go to this link, let me just share the link with you. Thank you, Susan. And then in the first column, it talks about the 3 things that you're going to work on to facilitate more engagement. And then you'll notice in the Padlet, actually, I'll make sure that I give it to the other people who participate today too, but there are other links so that hopefully, you know, I think teachers also need a lot of support. And so if you go to that Padlet, you can actually add more information about links and books and movies about teaching that have inspired you. And then hopefully we can kind of gather more information. So sorry, let me just, oh, thank you, Miguel. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Okay, so when you go to the Padlet, can you see this? Oh, great, okay. So I made this for tomorrow's presentation as well. And Padlet is a wonderful way for students also to exchange ideas and also to add on to this. And I'd like to keep this open for as long as I can. So if you can add here 3 things that you're going to work on for learner engagement based on the conversations that you've had with your inspiring peers today, please feel free to add those. Other things that I'd like to address are, if you do have problems, please feel free to add them. And then if you can revisit this Padlet link now and then, I promise you things will be posted. I think it's good to share these things because sometimes we're used to talking to the same people, and I think sometimes we need to hear different perspectives. So inspiring books that you've read about teaching, movies about, it's shocking how many good films there are. Inspiring quotes, and also I think this is really important for professional development, the must-attend sessions that are free to help you improve your professional development as well. Okay. So I'm going to end here. I still have like many slides, but I'm also doing many presentations. So I promise you, like, if you go to those, then you'll see the same slides again. So I'm really happy to end here. And then what I'd like to do is answer any questions that you do have, because I know that some people had asked questions.